Hey, what is up? It is time for some common knowledge where I take a look at 10 common Magic the Gathering cards and then I'll tell you, right there, if they're good in the Pauper format or not. And most of them aren't, but some of them are. And I think we've had a pretty good streak lately of halfway decent Pauper cards, so maybe that'll continue today. Our first card is Orchard Spirit, which is a 2/2 spirit creature, and this creature can't be blocked except by creatures with flying or reach, which is really interesting on. I was going to say interesting on a green creature, but I guess the only other green creatures the only other creatures that have this that I can think of are also green creatures. You know, this is the oh god, what is it called? The Sylvana Ledgewalker. That's right, from that you'll see in Bogle's decks. That has a creature that can't be blocked except by creatures with flying or reach. So I guess this is a technically green ability. This is okay, but as a 2/2 for 3 mana, I already don't love the stat line. Yeah, it kind of has flying without having flying, so maybe you can do something with that. But it kind of is just a Solana Ledgewalker without the hexproof, and we just have a card that's better than that. So you should play the Ledgewalker instead. This is okay, but again, not incredible. I will go ahead and give it a 2.8. No, because it's kind of just like a 3 mana flyer in green. That's not good enough. It's kind of different for green, but it's not really good for green. Let's bump it down to like a 2.4. Sure, 2.4. That works for me. Next is Giant Dust Wasp, which is a green creature with flying. So they do happen sometimes, but this one's back from Planar Chaos, so they were messing around with stuff. I mean, green can have flyers, but generally it has more of the reach creatures and evasion in other ways like trample. Anyway, Giant Dust Wasp is 3 and double green for a 3/3 insect with flying. It also has Suspend 4 for 1 and a green. So rather than cast this card from your hand, you may pay 1 and a green and exile it with 4 time counters on it. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you remove a time counter. When the last is removed, you may cast it without paying its mana cost, and it would have haste at that point. So I like these cards, not this one specifically. This one's kind of bad, but I like these cards generally as a form of modality, as hey, these cards are good in the early game and they're good in the late game. So you don't hate drawing them at any time. You don't hate having them in your opening hand, and you don't hate drawing one later in the game. You know, if to try to talk about this in a different way, if you were to have a Colossal Dreadmaw in your opening hand, 6 mana, 6/6 trampler, okay, I won't be casting this for a long time, so this gives my opponent time to, hand disrupt me and maybe get rid of it, or maybe I just won't ever get the mana to be able to cast it over the course of a game, and it's just a card that sits in my hand all the time and basically rots. That doesn't feel good. And another thing, kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, getting a Llanowar Elf on turn 6 of a game is not going to feel great either. Okay, cool, this mana dork that's, a really good turn 1 play and still a pretty good turn 2 or turn 3 play even. But on turn 6, when you draw it, a 1/1 doesn't really make a difference much anymore, and making an extra mana also probably doesn't make a difference when you have a lot of mana and maybe you've accelerated into other things. You just don't need that card anymore. It's not as useful to you. So having a card like this, which I'm going to say neither mode is better than a Colossal Dreadmaw or a Llanowar Elf, but this kind of splits the difference a little bit. Okay, if this is in my opening hand, I can suspend this on turn 2, and then it'll come in a whole lot later, but at least I spent my mana efficiently on turn 2, and then I can make other plays on turn 3 and 4. And you know what? On turn 5, or not turn 5, but I guess it comes later. But whenever this does come down, it gets haste, so now I've got a 3/3 haster flying. That's okay. And I have all my mana available to me because this was pre-paid. And that's cool. Or, if I draw this on turn 6, I go, hey, a 3/3 flyer is a lot more impactful to the game at this point in the game on turn 6. I don't mind casting this for its full cost, and then I just have a 3/3 flyer. Cool. So I like both modes of this thing. It's just that once it's on the board, it's a 3/3 flyer with, and that's it. And sometimes it'll have haste, but um, that isn't good enough in our format. I really like it for something like limited. I think that's time spiral block of planar chaos, and then even going into modern masters or time spiral mastered. I have played some time spiral mastered limited, and that was really fun. And part of the fun was being able to play with suspend cards and being able to do things like this. Okay, I've got a suspend card early, and then I know we'll have a big explosive turn later in the game. This thing is not good for Pauper though. The 3/3 flyer is just generally kind of bad. It's really bad if I have to wait until, what is that, turn 6? Is that turn 6? 4, 3 is, yeah, I think that's turn 6. So waiting until turn 6 to get your 3/3 flyer, not great. Even casting it at 5 mana, still not great. It's just a 3/3 flyer and it doesn't really do anything else for you. Now, if you do have some ways of messing with time counters, you have clock spinning or something like that, which I believe clock spinning is a common, yes? Clock spinning. Yeah, clock spinning is a common. I think we've even looked at this one on the channel. You're able to take away time counters from permanents you have. So like that's maybe that's something. So you can get this thing a whole lot earlier, and you still only paid 2 mana initially for it. Maybe there's something there, but you could probably do a whole lot better with your Pauper deck at that point. So I think this guy's going to get like a 2.2. It is. We spent a lot of time kind of talking around the theory of it, but the sad truth of it is it's just not a very good card. Pendulum of Patterns is 2 mana for an artifact. When this artifact enters, you gain 3 life. You can pay 5, tap, and sacrifice this artifact to draw a card. So there's nothing about this that is all that bad. This thing enters and you gain 3 life. We've seen artifacts do that in the past that's pretty solid. And then being able to sacrifice this thing to draw a card. Okay, that's okay too. I'll point to a couple of things though that make this card, I guess, bad. One of them is a card that we see played a lot in Pauper, and that's Lembas, which is 2 mana, so the same mana cost to get this on the table. But this one, when it enters, you scry 1 and you draw a card. So you get the card first, and you get the scry, which is also really nice. And then you can pay 2, just 2, tap and sacrifice it to gain the 3 life. So it kind of is just the opposite of the Pendulum of Patterns. You're still paying the same to get it on the board. You gain the life later, but you get the card first. And I think Lembas is just the better card in that way. I would want the card faster than I want the life most of the time. The other thing that is useful to know, and Lembas then shuffles back into your library. There's stuff you can do with that too. But the other card I wanted you to look at is Navigator's Compass, which is a single mana for an artifact that when it enters, you gain 3 life. So you're getting the life part much faster. This gets played in Orzhov Blade and some anything that wants to like bounce. Anything that can bounce a lot of artifacts is playing Glinthawks and Core Skyfishers. They will sometimes play this because this is pretty good life gain for a single mana. And then it also color fixes as well, because it can tap to make a target land you control become a basic land type of your choice in addition to its other types. So that allows it to color fix you. So you see this. I think this might have even been played in Tron at one point. It isn't really anymore because we just have better things that have unlocked for us with things like Bonder's Ornament, with things like Barrels of Blasting Jelly, with things like Prophetic Prism, and even the new Giant's Boulder from The Hobbit. So Navigator's Compass, I think, is seeing a lot less play in Pauper these days, but still a pretty good card if you just want to gain some life. So now we've seen 2 cards that just kind of do this thing better. If you want to play this card solely for the life gain, you play Navigator's Compass. If you want to play this for the card draw, you should probably play, well, lots of other artifacts. I could show Eker Wellspring and other things here too that you probably want to try, and even a Prophetic Prism, which you just mentioned. But if you wanted the life gain and the card draw, I think Lembas is still your card for that. So this doesn't really rate highly for me, especially when I have to pay 5 mana to get the card. That seems kind of nuts. I'm gonna go to a straight up 2 for this one. There's just so many other options available to you that you would be much better served by playing those cards instead. I do want to mention I like the art though. I think the art here is pretty good. Rootwater Mystic is a single blue mana for a 1/1 Merfolk Wizard. You can pay 1 and a blue and look at the top card of target player's library. That's not very good. It's really just 1 mana for a 1/1. Yeah, sometimes it can be nice to look at the card of your opponent so you know what's going on. But you can't do anything about it. You can't fate seal them. You can't. I suppose you could use that before deciding to force them to shuffle if you have something that does that. But for the most part, you're just going to be paying a whole lot of mana to kind of do nothing. You get a little bit of knowledge, but you don't really get much more than that. You could also look at the top card of your library, which why would that be useful in the Pauper format? I know that can be useful in things like miracle decks that are trying to pull something off the top, and so maybe you make sure that it's good. But at that point, you should probably just use a scry effect, so then you can also not only know what's at the top of your library, but if it's not good, you can put it at the bottom of your library instead, or a surveil effect for a similar reason. I think this is just a pretty expensive cost to really kind of do nothing. You know, there's another card. I know we've looked at it on the channel a long time ago, but Glasses of Urza, which is one of my. I love this card. I truly do love Glasses of Urza, but it just taps to look at target player's hand. That knowledge can be very useful to you, but it doesn't actually do anything, and that can be a little tough to swallow. And I think this is a card that kind of fits in the similar boat of okay, well, at least I saw that they have the Tolarian Terror on the top, so they're just going to play it and murder me. Great. Could you have done anything about it? Maybe you have a way of milling them, but eh, I think this is mostly just wasted mana on your end, and I'm going to give this a pretty bad score. I think this is like a 1.5. Again, cool art on that one though, and cool art on this one. Our little RKF art, we like that. Marrow Sky Swimmer is 3 and double Azorius mana, so a white or a blue, and then a white or a blue. And this is a 2/2 Merfolk Soldier with flying and vigilance, but it also has Convoke, which means your creatures can help cast the spell. Each creature you tap while casting the spell pays for a colorless, well, pays for 1 generic, or a mana of that creature's color. And also, when this creature enters, you create a 1/1 white and blue Merfolk creature token. Kind of nice. So if you have to cast another one of these, now you've got 2 creatures that can convoke and take out the color mana requirements at the very least. A 2/2 flying and vigilance is okay, especially when it makes another 1/1 body. These are okay things. I don't mind that at all. 5 mana is a lot, but you're never really paying 5 mana because you can convoke this. So you convoke it in early, and it's okay. But I think for the most part, you're probably just losing value on the table by trying to play this card. You can just play other better cards that come down earlier and can get bigger over time rather than play this and you play this a little bit later and I don't know. It's 5 mana for 3/3 worth of stats, and only 2/2 of that has flying and vigilance. And I don't think a 2/2 flying vigilance is really all that useful, especially in a format where core Skyfisher exists, and it just does. So it's better than that. Do you want to convoke and get this thing down and spend a bunch of resources to get this down even earlier, only for it to trade with a refurbished familiar? Not really. That doesn't feel good. Glinthawk has these same stats. It doesn't have vigilance, but it has these same stats, and it costs 1 mana and probably does more to help your game plan. The convoke can matter if you're trying to tap creatures specifically. Maybe your creatures have abilities that happen when they tap, but for the most part, you just have way better options than this. The RKF art is great, don't get me wrong, but I don't think this is a particularly good card. I will give it a 2.1. Muzzle is 1 and a white for an enchantment aura that enchants a creature. Prevent all damage that would be dealt by enchanted creature. Not too bad. Like a pacifism kind of effect. but pacifism specifically says it can't attack or block. This one, you're getting a couple of different looks at this, right? Because the creature can block still, and it can still attack. It's just not doing any damage. Um, so if you put this on, let's say, a Gurmag Angler, just something kind of big, so a big 5/5, that's still kind of like a 0/5 wall they've got. Because they can still block, it just won't do any more damage to your creatures. Okay, but it's still blocking. Wouldn't I rather have a pacifism in that instance, or many other cards that are better than pacifism to just stop the creature from blocking altogether, to maybe even get the creature off the table altogether with like a Journey to Nowhere, which is the same mana cost. And yeah, you probably do want that. This could be useful though if you're talking specifically about something like Gutter Snipe, because a Gutter Snipe is doing this doesn't say combat damage. This just says damage. So Gutter Snipe is doing a lot of non-combat damage, and this would prevent all of that happening. You know what else would prevent all that from happening? Still hitting that Gutter Snipe with a Journey to Nowhere. You really should just be playing Journey to Nowhere instead of any of these kind of pacifism effects, because it's just not as good. You're spending a lot of these narrow slots of, do I want to prevent damage? Do I want to prevent attacks or blocks? Do I want to prevent activated abilities? There's all sorts of little white enchantments that can do those kinds of different things. But Journey just says, what if it was off the table completely? What if I didn't have to worry about it anymore? And that's why Journey to Nowhere is such a played card, and these other cards see zero play. Muzzle, while it has, again, we're getting really cool art on all these cards. This one is also pretty bad, and I would say generally worse than a pacifism, which is also not a very good card in Pauper. So I'm going to give this a 1.8. It still is kind of a removal spell, and I don't hate it for that, but it's not particularly good. Grave Birthing is 2 and a black for an instant. It's got Devoid, which means this card has no color. It's not black. It's not a black spell. It's a colorless spell. Target opponent exiles a card from their graveyard. You create a 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Scion creature token. It has sacrificed this token to add a colorless, and you draw a card. That's a lot of stuff that we don't mind in Pauper at all. All these things are solid things. Instant speed, we like that. Exiling a card from an opponent's graveyard, we like that. If they're trying to get back a Lotleth Giant, or if they're trying to exhume a Troll of Khazad-dûm or something, pretty cool to be able to just say, no, that one's gone. You don't get that. You get the 1/1 Eldrazi Scion here. So it's not a 0/1 Eldrazi spawn. It's a 1/1. So you actually do get something that can, attack if you needed it to. But it also still sacrifices to add a colorless, which is useful. We see plenty of Eldrazi spawn things, Writhing Chrysalis that makes those. So we like those little token creatures. And it draws you a card. All these things are good. 3 mana is a little expensive. That's a little bit more than I want to spend on Graveyard Hate, especially. Think about the other cards that we use for Graveyard Hate in this format. Relic Progenitus, single mana. Neil Spellbomb, single mana. Tormod's Crypt, 0 mana. Fairy Macabre, you activate the ability for free for 0 mana. So there are just cards that do this, and not do everything that this card does, but do the specific things you would need this card to do better. And I think you'd probably end up playing those cards before this. But I do like this. I like that it just stuffs a bunch of good things in here. I love that it replaces itself. I love that it gives me a 1/1 that also can ritual ramp me up for a turn. These are just really good things. I'm going to give this a decent score, even though I don't think this is really Pauper playable. And I'll give this a 3.4, which I think is a decent score for what we usually get, which are things that are in the 1s and 2s most of the time. Grave Birthing, solid card. Sandstone Needle. Well, here's a card that's going to be a lot better than anything we've seen before. Sandstone Needle is a land that enters tapped, but it comes into play with 2 depletion counters on it. You can tap and remove a depletion counter from this land to add red. And if there are no depletion counters on this land, you sacrifice it. So these depletion lands are solid, as you can see here, costing $6.50 for a sandstone needle. Now it's only been printed once, which is also part of the problem. But these lands are starting to get a lot more play in the Pauper format, sometimes even in the Commander format, because you can do lots of proliferate shenanigans, and you can do that in the Pauper format as well. But you're proliferating the depletion counters on this, so you'll get more opportunities to tap for the double mana. This thing does ramp you in a way because it is giving you 2 mana for 1 land. So you play this on turn 1 tapped, and then you play another land on turn 2, and on turn 2 you have 3 mana. And the idea here is that, well, they should deplete, and then you wouldn't have, you'd lose this. So you'd lose out on that mana eventually. So you're getting like a little boost twice, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. And sometimes that still happens. But in our format, we still see either proliferate effects, and you'll see this in mostly the Dimir poison decks. The poison storm decks will play the blue, black, and I think sometimes even the green depletion lands, and just as ways of getting you a bunch of mana, because you're always doing these proliferate effects for the poison counters on the opponent anyway. So why not do it for all these lands and get yourself a whole lot of extra mana out of the deal? Pretty cool. This one specifically, the Sandstone Needle, gets played in the red storm decks, or the Gruul storm decks, I guess. They're mostly red, but they play a little bit of green. And you also see the green depletion lands played in there too. Not as much, because red mana makes much more of a difference in those decks. But those decks want this because you want to boost up your mana pretty quickly early to get you those storm triggers. And then at some point you've reduced your mana cost so much with, Goblin Electromancer and whatever that green beetle thing is that reduces the cost of your red spells by 1 as well. So you're getting your spells down enough that you kind of don't need this anymore. It doesn't matter that this thing would go to the graveyard, that you lost your depletion land, because now all your spells cost so cheap because you ramped them out really early. And now you can just keep playing those spells and getting treasure tokens through Big Score. And I really don't like the Red Storm decks. They're not fun to play against because they're these kind of non-deterministic combos that your opponent can just take a ton of time, and in the non-deterministic way, they'll just sometimes brick, and you'll go, okay, that was it. That was the turn. And then the next turn, they'll probably just do it again if you don't kill them. So unless you have counter magic or, specific creature removal at specific times, those decks just kind of run over you, and I don't really like playing against them because I just have to watch my opponent play Magic for 10 minutes, and I sometimes lose. I don't know. I don't really like it, but I do have to respect these lands quite a bit. They are really good. They are really good. I'm going to give them a 7.2. Good land. Good land for the format. Outmuscle is 3 and a green for a sorcery. Put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control, then it fights target creature you don't control. And it also has Adamant. If at least 3 green mana was spent to cast this spell, the creature you control gains indestructible until end of turn. This sounds like it could be okay, but this is not okay. This, I think, is actually a really bad card. Let me see if I can find a card that illustrates my point. Signature Slam, is that what I'm thinking? So this is uncommon, so I guess not a great comparison. But this also puts a +1/+1 counter on a target creature you control, and then each modified. We don't really care about that, but this is this is putting a +1/+1 counter on your creature, and then it's a bite effect. So it's your creature dealing damage to the opponent's creature, and each modified creature that's potentially doing even more damage. But this is 3 mana for an instant that puts a 1/1 counter and is a bite effect, instead of 4 mana that puts a +1/+1 counter and then is a fight effect. But if you play it in a very specific way and your creature's indestructible, well, okay, it's kind of like it was a bite effect at that point, because the fight doesn't matter. You can take the damage because your creature's indestructible. I guess this also allows your creature to now swing in in combat and still be indestructible. So I guess that's okay. But we just have this. What about Tail Swipe? Tail Swipes, a single green mana, choose a creature you control and target creature you don't control. If you cast a spell during your main phase, it gets +1/+1, and then they fight. That's pretty close. That's pretty close to what you're using Out Muscle for. It's still +1/+1 and a fight, and this is +1/+1 and a fight, but instant speed and also at a single mana. It's not exactly the same. This isn't a counter, but I just think you have a whole lot of better options than Out Muscle. Art's fun. He's suplexing a bear. That's pretty sweet. But I just don't like this card. It's so expensive for a green removal spell. I guess if you are green removaling, you're using a removal spell in green, and then also, your creature's indestructible, so now you can swing in. Maybe it's a big guy with trample. I guess you could make it work. I just think it's really expensive, and I don't think you're getting enough value out of it. Like maybe it'll be good in very specific situations, but in most situations, it will just be a very expensive removal spell that you won't feel that great about. I'm going to give this a begrudging 2. I want to give it even lower than that, but I think we can just call it a 2. Oh my! I thought Sandstone Needle was going to be our best card by far, but this one, whoo, man. Ghostly Flicker is 2 and a blue for an instant. Exile 2 target artifacts, creatures, and/or lands you control. Then return those cards to the battlefield under your control. What a card! This is played everywhere. It's played in Commander. It's played in certainly Pauper. I'm sure. I don't know. I don't keep up with Modern, but I have a feeling a card like this would be really good in Modern. This is a great card, and you can see, like, even for a common, it's held up its value pretty well, over $1 everywhere, and then it's still got this secret lair drop from is that the PlayStation one? I think so. Yeah, it's not like the Sony, the Sony PlayStation one for Ghost of Tsushima, maybe. Ghostly Flicker is awesome. This gets played in a handful of different decks. This gets played probably mostly in something like some Tron decks. The Flickertron. This is the Flicker in Flickertron. This also sees some play in Familiars decks and decks that want to just blink things like Mole Drifter or Archaeomancer. This is really good with Archaeomancer because you're blinking the Archaeomancer and blinking another thing, whether it's a land or another creature, because this can target all those different things, an artifact maybe, and then this will go to the graveyard because you cast that spell. Then the Archaeomancer now comes back into play after the blink's over, and it can return an instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. Well, looky there, a Ghostly Flicker was in your graveyard. I'll take that, and now you put it back into your hand, and then you just keep going, and that's a loop at that point, because you can, as long as you keep at least targeting the Archaeomancer, you will always get the Ghostly Flicker back and get a second thing to flicker. Damn, that's a really good combo when you can pull that off, and it just creates this incredible value that your opponents can't hope to match. I've played this card in like a Dimir Affinity shell. I don't really like Grixis Affinity because it feels, I don't know, too easy, or I don't know. There's too expensive. I don't want to like buy Utrom monitors and expensive cards like that. That's just not me. That's not why I got into the Pauper format. But playing this with Tithing Blades and Grim Baubles and Kenku Artificer is the deck that I really like. Is the card I really like flickering this with in my deck. I'll have to show off my Dimir Flicker deck at some point, but a lot of it is about making the indestructible bridges into artifact creatures with Kenku, and now having big flying artifact creatures that can swing in, and having all these different things that I can do by flickering spells, or bouncing stuff with the Dreamstalker as well. I really like that card too. So this is cool. This is a really good card. It shows up in a lot of decks, and it's a staple of those decks. There's decks that are partially named for this card. Well, the reason we call them flicker effects is kind of because of this. Like, the Ghostly Flicker is just a hell of a thing. I gotta give this a really high score. It is 3 mana, but when you can flicker 2 things, That's really good. The the flicker Tron part, because this can flicker lands. If you have Tron, if you have the Urza's Tower power plant and mine, if you flicker two of the lands, you paid 3 mana to play this, and you flicker the lands so they come back in untapped. Let's say you flicker the tower and the power plant. Well, that's 5 mana. You just netted yourself extra mana. You tap those lands to get yourself 5 mana. You use a prophetic prism or something to make one of it blue. You cast this. You flicker those lands. Those lands come back and they're untapped, and you can tap for another 5. You're netting yourself a whole lot of mana because Tron can do ridiculous things. There's so many different things that you can do with Ghostly Flicker. I've barely touched the surface, I think, of all the different cool interactions that you can do with Ghostly Flicker. Really good card. I know it's a little expensive in terms of the Pauper format, but I would grab yourself 4 copies of this because you will find reasons to play it in lots of different decks. Not every deck that plays blue, but damn near. Damn near. It doesn't go in Terror. It doesn't go in Fairies. But like most other blue decks, it probably has some sort of place. What a card for our last official card of the day too. Score wise, I gotta go with something like an 8.1. God, it's a good card. I love Ghostly Flicker. Fantastic card. Final card of the day, just a little bonus card here, is Volcanic Hammer, a classic. Not a very good card, but a classic card. Volcanic Hammer is 1 and a red for a sorcery. Volcanic Hammer deals 3 damage to any target. It's not good. It's not good. Sorcery speed is pretty bad. This is just a more expensive, slower lightning bolt. And that ain't gonna play in the Pauper format. But I've definitely cast a Volcanic Hammer many a time in school when I first started getting into Magic, because this was an 8th edition card. I was playing the 8th edition at that time, and yeah, it showed up in 9th edition too. But I was playing in 8th edition, so I had a bunch of 8th edition copies, and I believe I even had some of these old Portal's the original one. I didn't actually have this Portal version. I had the Second Age one, or maybe even the starter one. But I remember this art more. And then yeah, once 8th edition came around, I was playing this. I don't think I have an original Portal version of this. But Volcanic Hammer, classic Magic card, bad Magic card, but classic. And that counts for something. I will give this a 2.5. It's not great, but solid. And if you're going for like a old school burn deck, I think this would be really nice in an old school burn cube or something, or having an archetype that has some burn in it. This can be okay. I love that it can hit any target too. So hit a creature if you need to. When Lightning Bolt is just too strong, which is many a time, many a time has Lightning Bolt been too strong for a format. So Volcanic Hammer is there to be like, hey, I'm way worse. You can play me, and I'll make sure your format is safe. I don't think we're getting rid of Lightning Bolt anytime soon in Pauper. I think that's one of the big draws of Pauper, is that you can play really busted spells like Lightning Bolt and Brainstorm, and they're okay because everything's commons anyway. I love Volcanic Hammer. I'm not too cowardly to say that I think Volcanic Hammer is a cool card. Anyway, that is all we have for today. I will catch you on the next one. Till then, bye.